Oh, there you go. Thank you. What a great intro. I'm going to start by telling a little bit about how I got here and why I'm out here, not just today, but really focusing my career on making sure that open is first in technology. For those of you, many people have mentioned the Linux Foundation over and over again. We're obviously here at SCaLE, where the Linux kernel is core to these discussions. And the Linux Foundation for the last 25, 30 years has really been focused on building the best open source code bases, but also the best open source communities that are truly open and global in nature. Today, if you think about the Linux kernel, obviously, I would say the most important open source project in the world, but that we have many other projects at the Linux Foundation. If you think about cloud computing, the cloud native computing with Kubernetes, where over 80% of the internet, for example, runs on Kubernetes, and the many other projects there. Even in the film industry, the Academy Software Foundation, which has open source projects that run the 3D rendering in the movie industry. Why did the movie industry come to the Linux Foundation to start open source projects around video creation and other types of content creation industry tools? Because they want to spend their time building the best movies that we can see. So across the boards, whether you're talking about automotive grade Linux and electronic automotive industry, recently, obviously, a lot of artificial intelligence and AI projects. So a couple of months ago in December, we announced the Agentic Association, the Agentic Agent Association. Let me try that again. The Agentic AI Association. We have PyTorch as part of our portfolio projects, and these are really important projects that big companies come together to work, contribute the code and work together. But there, the smaller companies come in. 10 years ago, in 2015, we started a project, at the time was called Hyperledger. And Hyperledger was the first open source blockchain project that we really, the industry brought to market with enterprises. And at the time, it was one project. It was a distributed ledger project. It was a permission distributed ledger. And over the last 10 years, we've really built the foundation of building open source projects and communities and standards that are really focused on decentralized technologies. So in September of 2021, we took that project, which was called Hyperledger, and we expanded the mission and the charter at the Linux Foundation for Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And that's where I am the executive director of LF Decentralized Trust. And I also serve as general manager across many of these projects that are focused on decentralized technologies. We also brought in projects like Trust over IP that Drummond mentioned. And we continue to grow projects within our community. But very importantly, we have access across all these great Linux Foundation projects and across all the different standards organizations that are working on. We talked a bit about the W3C, and we're really focused on how do we bring the communities together. And I think it's just critical for us, as we think about true decentralization, to think about how do we go about, let's see, again. How do we go about bringing the hard questions of power, trust, and who decides on power and trust when we're thinking about decentralized tech? So I want to talk today about three things, and I'm going to open it up to the panel. And I also want to make sure, I think there's a lot of people in the audience that have lots of questions for all of you here on the panel. I want to start talking about how do we avoid new concentrations of power. Richard, you just talked about it very, very clearly, right? And I see a lot of intention and really good people showing up, talking about openness, right? Talking about open development. Rafi, you talked about it as well, right? You've seen it from the other side and for very long. How do you build content communities that are able to actually monetize the content that they have? there's a really clear vision, I think, in this room of how we do it. But the practical reality is that we can very quickly create the same centralized systems that we have before. So I'm actually going to start with you, Richard. When we think about AGI platforms, AI models, or even identity providers, we are seeing, I think, centralization again in a few entities. So following your talk, like what are the key things that the audience, and then I'll open up to the rest of the panelists, should really be thinking about? Like, let's not centralize again.
Hello? Okay, sorry. It's a great question, and I guess I might be a bit of bring a bit of a different stance here, which is to say that not everything that's centralized is bad, and not everything that's decentralized is good. And certainly being an observer of this from the sidelines for many years at Google, and then becoming much more involved in the community, one of my concerns has been all the amazing stuff that's happening here doesn't scale. That we have groups of little communities that are working on these things in ways that serve their interests, serve their needs. Every time you hear about it, when I used to hear about a key party, let's go have a key party. Nobody in my block has any idea what you're talking about. So to me, the point is, how do you let people understand that these technologies work for them, which will probably require certain larger centralizing organizations. Maybe they're for-profits, maybe they're nonprofits, maybe they're government agencies, maybe they're civic institutions. But I think we shouldn't shy away from the notion of being centralized just because we feel like that's where the bad stuff has been happening in the past. I think we need some element of that going forward and create the right kind of a balance. What that balance looks like, of course, is the key. I don't think there's any danger today that what we're building here in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years will sort of come to dwarf what OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and the others are building. I think if we have a fair shot to compete with them successfully, with people's interests at heart, we'll do very well. But yeah, it's a great question. I don't have any singular answer, but I do think we should at least not think of centralization automatically as the bad guy.
I think it's more concentration, right, with the big brands.
For sure.
Even and as I mentioned before, the Agentic AI Foundation, right, brought in, and Anthropic brought in MCP, and OpenAI brought in a project, and Block brought on a project, and the product portfolio right now is really large. Everybody wants to come in because they realize that doing the work in the open, and open source, I say this all the time, right? Open source, has won. Like everybody open source, right? And there's open source where you put open source in a GitHub and everybody can take a look at it. Maybe people can, submit issues, is one thing. We highly recommend that everybody goes down that route. But how do you build open source that's openly governed and very much openly developed and from a global perspective? And this is one of the things that certainly the Linux Foundation over the last 20 plus years has brought to the table, is that we provide that infrastructure to do that. But it's still, it's still the big company showing up with the first projects that we go around. So maybe, Rafi, you can talk a bit about that.
Hello. Maybe I'll take a slightly different take. And the way that I want to approach the problem is that I feel like it starts with developers and enabling developers to do basically kind of whatever they want, or changing the equation of what's possible by an individual versus what's possible by large groups of people. So if you look at the AI ecosystem right now, a lot of the biggest pushes forward, not all the pushes forward because it follows some form of a power law, the biggest pushes forwards are being done by large groups of people that are incredibly well capitalized. And a lot of that's because there's just a synergy between architecture and hardware and money, and this sort of spins in a circle. And so I think that the tack that we're trying to take, at least at Mozilla, is that under the assumption that developers actually set the standards, developers actually then set the culture by the applications they push out into the world, and therefore developers actually set what might be possible in the future. I just want to make it so that 1 million flowers can bloom or 1 billion flowers can bloom. So we approach the centralization, decentralization question by just trying to shift power to as many of those developers as possible. So I think it starts with, these back-end technologies around like how can we explore different frameworks, different architectures for models, for compute, for data, for developer experience. And then it goes all the way through things like, it's unsurprising that a lot of problems look like browser problems to someone who works at Mozilla, but like what it looks like as APIs that can be exposed in usable interfaces for people that again could lower the barrier of entry for developers to go in. Like one of the worlds I want to live in is that we redefine what the word developer means so that more people can participate in the building. And I think if we get there, then we get to a sort of a decentralized world that I think becomes very interesting.
I love that. For someone who's not a developer, I'm actually a librarian. So I came into open source and the blockchain industry from working 16 years at Dow Jones in the financial industry on data, ontologies, and taxonomies. So, I do think that. And, back to the conversation, of the concentration of power, right? Even when I look out in a room like this, right, it's pretty much the same people I see everywhere, right? How do we, and, Richard, you mentioned, bringing more civic society into, like, how do we bring more people into it? So starting from the developers is a core piece of it as well. Drummond, I know that you think about this quite a bit, and specifically around identity standards over the last 30 years, I think your bio said. How do you see a little bit about how do we break this concentration of power from even the big identity providers?
3 initials, VTC, verifiable trust communities. I think it's pretty easy to see that one of the reasons we're dependent, particularly, one of the places, social media, is because trust is so hard to accomplish online. So therefore, what happened was those who had the largest networks and therefore could provide some level of a trust solution, it was just a gravity well. It was a gravity trust well. And as I illustrated, trying to create a small trust community, trying to decentralize trust. We do it right here, person to person, but we have not had the tools to do that online. Okay, that's exactly why we're doing the decentralized trust work. What I think is fascinating is, things were moving along. We're 6 years into Trust RIP. This last year, it's like we went from first gear into fourth gear. What's pushing it? We're riding the AI wave, right? Everyone's suddenly going, oh, with AI, if we don't have some kind of trust solution, we're really screwed. And you're right. So that's why I think, and I'm serious, verifiable trust communities, one of the things that I think is most fascinating is we've started to get the idea out there. The most interesting initial verifiable trust communities, we had several conversations about this at Linux Foundation Member Trust, when we put a tool into people's hands, which we did on a conference on Monday called the Summit for Human Agency. The feedback was, oh, the first trust community I want to create is my family. And I said, well, oh, wow, okay, let's do that. And then it was, well, my neighborhood and my church. And let's do it at not my whole school, just my class, right? Hey, that's how we can finally really start to decentralize trust. We put that together with personal AI, we can really change the playing field.
I think the phrase we were using or we use is the Internet of Trust, right? How do we get to a point where the trust is based on the human individuals as well? So it actually brings me. Just yesterday, I was listening to a podcast specifically about crypto and AI and agents, and how AI agents and what's happening in the AI space is actually going to be driving the adoption of crypto, because suddenly one of the things, like right now, over the last 10 years, people have spent a lot of time making crypto friendly for users. It's to be seen whether that's been successful or not, like a MetaMask wallet or something. But agents don't need friendly UIs to actually do things, right? So it was an interesting conversation because we've been trying to create vocabulary around crypto and blockchain and payments, and now we don't have to, right? We can just tell our Claude bots to go off and do something and invest as we go around. Go ahead.
You want to give your club out your crypto keys, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah. That's a particular topic, and that is something I'm working on with some colleagues, is a secure OpenClaw type system that maybe you would want to trust making crypto or other financial transactions, which would not be recommended with the literal Claude bot at this moment. But I want to go back to the theme that you landed on. So I think if we look at how do we get decentralized guidance and governance of AI and other software systems to actually work, I mean, there's multiple layers here. I mean, certainly we first of all need software architectures and designs that are not just tailor-made for monolithic centralized infrastructure, right? And that's being a challenge in AI now, right? Where like the best, biggest language models sort of want to be trained in a hyperscale data center, and that doesn't require centralized control, but it certainly leads you in that direction. And if you have other AI methods that are more naturally decentralized in the way that they learn and reason, then that's a start, right? In the same sense that the internet, being a decentralized protocol, sort of lends itself to decentralized governance of the internet, though it doesn't require it, right? Then at the other end, I mean, you need an enthusiastic community who's willing to pay attention and who cares about decentralized governance and is willing to participate. And of course, if you don't have that, then the governance mechanisms don't matter. Now, given the technology and the community, yeah, then you're down to sort of what you were alluding to, like what are the actual governance mechanisms that can work, and that's very hard, right? And I mean, in the crypto world, which I've been playing in since 2017, though I've been doing AI much longer than that. I mean, everyone wants decentralized governance. Most DAOs are controlled by like 3 people or something, and most voting is 1 token, 1 vote, which at least is very explicit what it is, right? But I mean, it's not the sort of participatory governance that people would dream of, and there's better ways than that. But what intrigues me here, among other things, is how to use the AI that we have to help the participatory governance work better, right? Because participatory democracy is like a long-standing dream. Like I mean, I remember in the '80s there was a little anarchist bookstore, like Revolution Books, on St. Mark's Place in New York. There's all these books on like, participatory councils and assemblies and all these like Kropotkin and Bakunin-based ways of doing participatory governance, and it's all quite hard to make it really work because people are too lazy to actually form all these assemblies, right? You have to spend all your time at it, and then it tends to turn into political infighting between 2 guys over something, right? So if we can use AI to somehow make participatory governance work better by just, the AI can talk to everyone, the AI can listen to everyone, the AI can synthesize different opinions, AI can make suggestions. I think there's a lot of potential for personal AIs to work together to make the participatory governance work. On the other hand, you've got to trust the fucking AI, right? So that there's kind of a feedback there. Like you need an AI that's smart enough to help with governance, where that AI itself is created and maintained by a successful participatory governance framework. And then you have like a flywheel of decentralized participatory AI guided governance, right? And that I think that's sort of what you were hinting at and what you were saying.
I dare say it's fiduciary AI agents sitting on a fiduciary infrastructure.
The challenge is we
governance.
need that to emerge within the next couple of years or so, right? So,
I'm trying my best.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's human agency, if you think about it, right? And last week we had a lot of conversations around like proof of authority as well, and how do you define those? I mean, I think that's all emergent things, but we just all giggled. We all think it's very funny how fast this thing is moving. Ben, like love to like Here, is it really moving that fast? Are you worried?
It is really moving that fast. I'm both excited and worried. As I said in my talk, I think we are viably 1 to 4 years from a human level AGI, and the default mainstream course is there's 2 of them, one controlled by U.S. government, the other by Chinese government, with various companies in their sway, but that's not determined, right? Just like it once wasn't clear you could have an open decentralized operating system and so on. The open source, just like DeepSeek suddenly popped out and kicked everyone in the ass, and people are like, well, hold on, maybe you don't need $1 billion to train an AI model, right? In the same way, like the next ChatGPT level breakthrough could pop out of my project or someone else's project in the open decentralized ecosystem, and then suddenly the centralized powers are playing catch up. Now, if that happens, the hope is that this open decentralized proto-AGI breakthrough comes along with an appropriate, system of participatory governance, right? And so that I think there's still hope there. But I also don't think that U.S. and Chinese government leading the development of AGI is inevitably going to kill everyone or something. Like Xi Jinping doesn't want to kill everyone. Even Trump doesn't want to kill everyone, right? So only certain people. So I think we're better off if AGI comes out with participatory governance in the decentralized world, but the other options may also lead to a beneficial outcome. There's a lot of uncertainty here.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried about nation states, doing bad things. I'm actually.
I'm worried about nation.
Well,
I'm very worried about nation states
I'm
doing
mostly,
bad things.
there's
Yeah.
a huge
Yeah.
gap of inclusion and who is going to benefit from a lot.
Well, yeah.
Right. If you think about it, and
there's you.
And
So
I don't know how that gap is going to be.
I founded an AI company in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, in 2013, and the educated middle class there is doing great, but like most of that country is subsistence farming. So this is one question I've often asked at conferences on the future of AI, like who will give universal basic income in the Central African Republic, right? I can see how, if Dario Amodei is right, let's say AI takes all the jobs in the next few years, I would imagine in China, the US, Western Europe, you have some variation of universal basic income after a whole lot of political hassle. In the developing world, it's not going to happen, right? So what happens? People go back to subsistence farming, or it seems a recipe for massive global unrest and mayhem, right? So indeed, theoretically, decentralized crypto economics, decentralized software can help spread the abundance as it emerges. On the other hand, crypto is illegal in Ethiopia, for example, right? So there's a lot of mixed up dynamics between nation states and AI taking over human jobs, and there's certainly a lot of issues we can't resolve simply by putting better governance mechanisms in place. But still, we're going to be better off having beneficial, participatory governance in place than not, right?
We have to try something. So back to the speed. All 4 of you have been in technology for a long time. If you can think about maybe other technology innovation that's moved fast, and maybe things that we could point to that say those kind of principles should be applied in today's ecosystems.
Nothing has moved this fast. No, seriously, nothing has, and that's, I think that's part of the urgency of why we have to do something, and why I really like the fact that we are leaning into AI to help us solve the problem. And everyone in this room is saying, but decentralizing it is just an imperative, right? because otherwise, I really think it looks pretty dark if we don't succeed in doing that. That's the other thing we're finding is it's not just the progress of AI, it's the progress or the speed of concern about it that is the other wave that we need to ride. And I think this idea of using it for participatory democracy or reinvigorating participatory democracy is a very powerful thing to be.
Yeah, I think if you look at the last 30 years, uptake of the web, uptake of search, mobile, social media, crypto to some degree, right? Those all happen within it's a short time frame compared to many other technologies, but I agree with Drummond. AI just seems like it's totally different, not just because it's where the adoption is, but how fast it's evolving to the point of, is it going to become AGI in a couple of years? I don't know. But in the meantime, it's the same folks who brought us all the other sort of cloud-based innovations the last 30 years are now the ones crowding out the space in AI. So that gets back to your concentration question. I don't know what the answer is there. One thing a quick plug on is what I'm calling personal augmentation agents. It's the idea that we should have AI agents that are trained on us, maybe using small language model approaches or hybrids with large language models, and then become my emissaries in the world. So example, bring my own bot to work. So it can supplement me at the workplace rather than waiting for my boss to fire me because it's extracted all my cognitive knowledge and given it to a bot. Why can't I bring my bot to make me a better employee? And at some point, maybe a better post-employee when I leave there to start my own company or whatever, right? But same thing with healthcare, with finance, over and over. I think if we could figure out how to excite people about having their own agent trained on them to represent them at the edge, vis-a-vis what the other guys are selling us, we need a vision. We need something that people can get excited about and want to participate in. So I believe that's maybe one way to try to think about how to broaden the appeal of what we're trying to do here so that ordinary people are like, yeah, that's the future I want to be part of.
Yeah, I love that.
I
Love
just
it.
wanted to say, like, it has not moved this fast before. I mean, the internet and mobile came fast, but I mean, like within our AI research team in SingularityNet, like each of us on the research side is using AI to make research papers and code bases, but we don't have time to read each other's stuff. We just feed it to our AIs, right? I mean, so it's almost like it's humans mediating the communication between AIs and AIs developing stuff. And we're not using entirely free and open AIs. We're using them when we can, but we're using them together with just the best models that are there. And it's in many respects an entirely new situation, and we do need to nudge it in a direction where, like, the AIs that we're using to develop the next AIs are part of this open and participatory governance framework. Otherwise, indeed, things can go awry in very strange ways.
Yep. And who owns those? I love that concept. Drummond and I actually met in 2007 around the concept of data portability. And many of us over the last week have spent a lot of time trying to move our models from one to another. And we're learning quite a bit about data portability as well. On the developer front, because I know that's dear and near to your heart. Last week there was so many conversations about open source developers and Claude Code, and how do you manage that? Because you have developers that are writing the tech for the bots, that are writing the tech for the tech of the bots. What do we do?
I don't have a good answer to this. But I will say that, like, I think this is all a question of just architecture. Like, we need to have, like, actual conversations of just, like, what the architecture needs to look like so that we can then set those as the interesting defaults that other people build upon. So, like, right now, like, I mean, the problem with OpenClaw is just, it's like an LLM wrapped in a for loop. Like, that's not architecture. And so, like, we need to figure out, like, how do we set the appropriate patterns that then can be then justifiably and reliably built upon. So I think that's, like, really the challenge for us in the room. It's not just building the interesting pieces of code that people will use. It's like, what are the trust architectures needed? What are all the other different training? How do we just set interesting patterns at the root of the stack so that they can propagate upwards?
Well, I think we have some time for a couple questions. Is that correct? Do we have time for questions? Okay. Oh, there's a let's take two questions. Can you?
Is this? Yeah. any attempt to establish standards in this field or build dominant, friendly AIs runs the risk of the capture of whatever leadership that project has. And I didn't hear any good ideas on how to prevent that, but tomorrow Leonora Kamner is going to be speaking at 3:45 at the Open Government track about how to create capture-resistant leadership structures for large social organizations. So this is essentially a plug. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arsene. It sounds like most of you guys don't think that general intelligence is here yet. I read some publications on the
You
topic.
mean even among humans, or you mean artificial?
among AI. I read some publications that make an argument for it that it's already here. And my question is, if we would take an average high school student, can we ask the question, does that person have general intelligence? And if that's the case, what does AI, let's say Anthropic's Opus, not have that a high schooler who has general intelligence does?
Well, one way I put this in the domain of AI for modeling music is if you train the best available deep neural models today on music up to the year 1900 and ask them to generate more music, they will not invent hip hop, neoclassical metal, or grindcore, right? They will combine elements of music that existed before 1900. If you ask them to put West African music together with classical music, they'll give you like Mozart to polyrhythms. They're not going to do what Duke Ellington did. So there's clearly an element of fundamental creativity which human beings have and current AI systems do not have, which means that if we were to replace humans with these LLMs, progress of culture and science would not exactly stop, but it would become even more derivative than it already is, and we wouldn't get to the singularity. Now, you could say only a small percentage of what we do every day manifests this kind of radical creativity, which is the case, but it's that small percent of human activity that drives our species forward and is quite important. I mean, you can give a more theoretical answer to this, like there are mathematical theories of what is general intelligence, and there's an answer grounded in that also, but this is a common sense answer.
So, and I'll finish with, as a mother of a high schooler, you don't have love and humanity. And that's, the key principle of what we all bring to the table. So thank you.
One last question.
I find the open source discussion amazing and interesting, especially Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. How many of the people that handle it have been involved in fraud? Isn't it 100% close to it?
No,
it really isn't actually.
It is actually very high. Now the problem with AI, the thing that concerns me, is when we're being imaginative. You've all been in startups. We've all been there. We're full of creativity and imagination, and that's a kind of a special feature you were just making that humans have. But because of neuroplasticity and other interesting physiological effects, if you're a mom or a family, where we use AI incorrectly to answer questions for us, it takes away the ability of the human mind to actually develop the ability to think. So actually, my view of AI is the world's going to end in 2 years if we don't learn how to use it to help us be creative and to think, because what we see in schools, both teachers, professors, embedded prompts in universities, is people are using it not to think, just to get an answer. Now, how shall we address that?
I mean, that's an issue with the way the formal education system is structured. It's not intrinsic to the technology.
Well, no, every time we do something, we work on something, neuroplasticity helps us become better at it.
Like when my 8-year-old son uses a smart watch to ask ChatGPT questions, I mean, he's asking about how different bugs do different things, and he's playing with bugs and doing experiments and watching them. Like kids most kids intrinsically will use the technology to help them think. It's just that the school system tends to track you into a different direction because it's based on a factory methodology from the 1800s.
I have a favorite question I ask people lately, to young people, 20s. Do you have conversations and discuss things, read books? My answer is most of the time the ladies, the gals do. The men are playing computer games. Now I watch people do this. They have their nose completely in their pads. And with AI makes this worse.
I'm going to suggest we call it there. Thanks very much.
Just 20 seconds. Yeah.
Quickly.
I would say the agents we have today, the LLM systems, they've all been trained in a very unilateral way, just to give us whatever, create the connections between knowledge domains, et cetera. I can imagine different kinds of agents, like a student-given agent, for example. I would call it a fiduciary agent, right? It's promoting the best interest of the student. What does that mean? The agent asks the student questions. You asked me this. What do you mean by that? Have you thought about this, right? We can train these things in all kinds of ways that creates a much richer educational experience than just simply the regurgitation of stuff to be put on a term paper. So the problem is we're getting it the way we're getting it because that's the way the big guys want it. There's so much other ways we can try to do this, I would argue.
The research.
Wow, what a
Thank you.
fantastic panel. And thank you so much, Daniela Barbosa, for moderating.